Learn English through story. The secret flame of lust. In the quiet, coastal town of Louviera, nestled between towering cliffs and the ever-crashing waves of the sea, there lived a man named Gabriel. Known for his sharp mind and fair dealings, Gabriel had carved a successful life for himself as a merchant of exotic goods. His business required him to travel frequently, often leaving his wife, Elena, behind for weeks at a time. Elena, much younger than Gabriel, was a woman of ethereal beauty. Her eyes shimmered like the ocean at dawn, and her laughter could be heard echoing through the narrow streets of Louviera, bringing warmth to the hearts of those who heard it. Despite the comfort and security Gabriel provided, there was a restlessness in Elena that stirred like an undercurrent. She often found herself wandering aimlessly through the town, her eyes drifting toward the horizon, as though searching for something beyond the mundane rhythms of life. As the years passed, the gap between their desires grew wider. Gabriel was content with his success, his routine, his quiet life. But Elena was not. The townspeople often whispered about her beauty and charm, and while most admired her from afar, one man dared to get closer. Lucian. He was a blacksmith, strong and rugged, with a reputation for being both dangerous and magnetic. His eyes were dark, and his gaze lingered longer than was proper. Lucian, too, had a secret yearning, one he had harbored since the day he laid eyes on Elena. She, in turn, felt a thrill around him that she couldn't quite explain but also couldn't resist. Their interactions began innocently in passing conversations at the market, stolen glances from across the street. But the spark between them grew stronger each time their paths crossed. Lucian's smoldering desire for Elena was like the heat from his Phrygia, constant, intense, and dangerous. And while Elena knew she should resist, the flame that had long lain dormant within her heart began to flicker to life. Gabriel, busy with his business and often absent, failed to notice the subtle shifts in his wife's behavior. He trusted Elena implicitly, believing that the life he provided for her was enough. But it wasn't. Elena, starved for passion, was drawn to Lucian like a moth to a flame. One evening, when Gabriel was away on a particularly long trip, Elena found herself walking by Lucian's smithy. The night was cool, and the sound of Lucian's hammer on metal echoed through the empty streets. As if guided by some invisible force, Elena entered the forge, her heart pounding in her chest. Lucian looked up, his shirt soaked with sweat, his eyes locking onto hers with a hunger that matched her own. Without words, they moved toward each other, the air between them thick with unspoken desire. The heat from the forge paled in comparison to the heat rising between them. What began as a simple kiss soon escalated into something far more dangerous. Their affair, ignited by lust, became an all-consuming flame that threatened to burn everything around them. Weeks passed, and their meetings grew more frequent, more reckless. Elena was no longer the innocent wife, she was a woman on fire, and Lucian was her match. But as with all flames, their passion began to scorch the very ground they stood on. The town, always watchful and prone to gossip, began to take notice. Whispers of their affair spread like wildfire through Louviera, though no one dared speak of it to Gabriel. The merchant, blissfully unaware, continued with his business, believing his life to be as steady as the tides. But beneath the surface, everything was changing. Elena, once filled with guilt over her infidelity, began to justify her actions. Gabriel, after all, had neglected her needs. He was distant, consumed by his work, and the passion that had once bound them had long since faded. Lucian, on the other hand, made her feel alive. He made her feel wanted, desired. But even as she convinced herself of these things, a shadow of doubt lingered in her heart. One night, as Elena lay in bed beside Gabriel, who had returned home earlier that day, she felt the weight of her choices pressing down on her. She had built her life on a foundation of lies, and now the foundation was beginning to crack. She thought of Lucian, of the fire between them, and wondered how long they could continue this dangerous dance before everything came crashing down. Meanwhile, Lucian was grappling with his own demons. He had always been a man of simple pleasures, but Elena had awakened something in him that he couldn't control. His desire for her had become an obsession, one that threatened to consume him. He knew that what they were doing was wrong, that it couldn't last, but he couldn't bring himself to end it. The flame of lust burned too brightly, blinding him to the consequences of his actions. The breaking point came on a stormy night, when Gabriel returned home unexpectedly. The winds howled outside, and the rain battered the windows as if trying to warn of the impending storm within. Gabriel, having heard the rumors swirling through town, had grown suspicious. He had dismissed them at first, unwilling to believe that his wife could betray him, but the seeds of doubt had been planted. That night, as Gabriel lay in bed, he noticed the way Elena's body tensed beside him, the way her mind seemed far away. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. And so, with a heavy heart, he made the decision to confront her. "Elena," he said, his voice quiet but firm, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me." Elena's heart raced as she turned to face him. She could see the pain in his eyes, the doubt that had taken root. She knew that the moment of truth had arrived, and there was no turning back. "What is it?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Is there something going on between you and Lucian?" Gabriel's words hung in the air like a thundercloud, ready to burst. Elena's breath caught in her throat. She had always feared this moment, and now that it had arrived, she felt paralyzed. She could lie, continue the charade, but something inside her told her that the time for lies had passed. The flame that had once burned so brightly within her had begun to flicker, dimming under the weight of her guilt. "Yes," she whispered, tears welling in her eyes. "There is." Gabriel's face contorted with a mix of shock and anger. He had suspected, but hearing the confirmation from her own lips was like a dagger to his heart. For a moment, he said nothing, his mind reeling from the betrayal. "How long?" he finally asked, his voice strained. "A few months," Elena admitted, her voice barely audible over the sound of the storm outside. Gabriel stood from the bed, his body tense with rage. He paced the room, trying to make sense of what had happened, of how his life had unraveled so quickly. He had loved Elena, had given her everything, and yet it hadn't been enough. "Why?" he asked, his voice breaking. "Was I not enough for you?" Elena didn't know how to answer. She had asked herself that same question many times, but the truth was that it wasn't about Gabriel. It was about her own restlessness, her own desire for something more, something that she hadn't even realized she needed until Lucian had come into her life. "I don't know," she said, her voice shaking. "I don't know why." Gabriel turned to face her, his eyes filled with pain. "I trusted you, Elena. I loved you." "I know," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I'm sorry." But sorry wasn't enough. The damage had been done, and there was no going back. The flame of lust that had once burned so brightly between Elena and Lucian had now consumed everything in its path, leaving nothing but ashes in its wake. In the days that followed, Gabriel made arrangements to leave Lavira, unable to bear the sight of the town that had witnessed his humiliation. Elena, too, was left to pick up the pieces of her shattered life. Lucian, realizing the destruction their affair had caused, withdrew into himself, his once burning desire now a smoldering regret. The affair had ended, but the consequences lingered. Elena, having tasted the forbidden flame of lust, found herself forever changed. The passion that had once consumed her had left her hollow, a reminder of the dangers of chasing desires without thought of the consequences. Levira, too, would never be the same. The town, once a quiet and peaceful place, now buzzed with the knowledge of the scandal that had rocked it to its core. And while the storm had passed, the memory of the flames would linger, a warning to all who dare to play with fire. In the end, the secret flame of lust had been revealed for what it truly was, a destructive force, one that could consume even the strongest of hearts, leaving nothing but ruin in its wake. And for Elena, Gabriel, and Lucian, the lesson was clear: some fires are best left unkindled, for once they begin to burn, they are nearly impossible to extinguish. I hope you enjoyed the story. If you enjoyed, then please like and share this video, and don't forget to subscribe our YouTube channel. Thank you for watching.